Hello, I'm Julie Niehoff, and welcome to another episode of Civil Society. Today we're talking about homelessness in Central Texas. In a recent census, volunteers from a local organization called ECHO, the Ending Community Homelessness Coalition, went out into the city between 2 and 6 a.m. on January 28th of this year to get an accurate count of people experiencing homelessness on a given day. They counted 834 people staying outdoors. 832 were in shelters or safe havens, and 370 were in transitional housing. Some have mental health issues, some are veterans, and some are people simply caught off guard with life, suddenly finding themselves on the street. Overall, there are more than 200 families with small children. All of these people living in our city are Austinites. So today we'll talk to some local leaders with organizations that are working toward real solutions. That's coming up right now on Civil Society. My first guest today is Susan Mcdowell, Executive Director at LifeWorks, which is a service organization that provides help and programs for youth and families that are dealing with difficult situations, including homelessness, but also issues like abuse, poverty, mental health, other things. So welcome, Susan. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a quick look at a video to get a general sense of some of the homelessness issues around Austin and how LifeWorks is dealing with those.
The most common place that we slept was at Chacon Park and also the Walmart on Ben White.
One time I had an anxiety attack and I freaked out, and some of the other people who were homeless didn't like that, and so they kicked me out.
I would not be able to afford an apartment without LifeWorks. I tried, and that's how I got my first eviction notice.
I feel like homelessness can get better if we all just try to understand people's situations rather than judging or just not helping.
Okay, so we're back now with Susan from LifeWorks. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So talk to me about youth and homelessness in Austin and what LifeWorks is doing.
So the population LifeWorks is serving with homelessness are primarily transition-aged youth. So these are youth who have grown up, or in many cases they've raised themselves amidst challenges such as poverty, homelessness, abuse, and multiple foster care placements.
So what age range are we talking about?
Roughly 16 to 26. We kind of call them fork in the road kids, right? It's time that somebody really stands up, believes in them, gives them support, or, and we know this, they and their children will struggle for the rest of their lives unless we create a pathway to self-sufficiency.
And how do they come to LifeWorks? How is it that you find them?
So we find them through Child Protective Services. We provide a lot of support for youth who are aging out of foster care, the school system, our partnerships with community organizations like ECHO. So, you know, we have our own street outreach program, right? So we've got multiple pipelines coming into LifeWorks, but the three core beliefs that shape everything we do revolve around everybody deserving a place to live. So we have shelter, transitional living, supportive housing, but that's not enough. You know, everybody also deserves the right to work, really. So we have employment programs, education programs that will support their sustainability. But then the final and maybe one of the most important pieces is that everybody deserves the opportunity to heal. What our youth have in common are backgrounds of deep trauma, and if they're in survival mode that you know, trauma reinforces, then they won't be able to build towards sustainability. So we also have, so we create healing environments and also evidence-based mental health services to help help them deal with their trauma so they'll be successful in their housing and successful in their employment
So it's sort of
pursuits.
a big picture approach. It's not just here's
Absolutely.
a place to sleep, but
Exactly.
here's everything else that you might need to get a leg up.
Right, what our community has learned about homelessness is that it's, the housing obviously is very important, but, providing the opportunity to heal, the opportunity to work, the opportunity to develop potential is so important for that sustainability.
Sure. Let me ask you a question that may seem a little bit silly. I want you to define homelessness because it might mean something different to different people, and what exactly does that mean?
For the purposes of our community work with ECHO and our partners, we are primarily interested in youth 18 to 24 who are literally homeless. That means that at least one night they've spent in a place not meant for habitation. That said, there are wider definitions used by Department of Education, Department of Labor, that really look at more kind of your couch, what we call your couch surfers,
Sure,
right?
which they have a place to stay. It may not be their place.
Right, but they
place.
are, at pretty imminent risk of homelessness. But it's really clear, particularly when you're doing collaborative community work and you've defined, a community problem you want to solve, that you're clear about these definitions because they matter.
It's important, and I know a lot of people watching would want to know exactly what we mean. So
Exactly, because we also don't want to make bold claims about problems that we're not actually solving,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, speaking of that, how many kids, and I'll include small kids, but specific to your programs, how many kids in Austin are homeless?
So if we're talking the literally homeless, 18 to 24 on our last point in time count, which you referenced, we had 107. And then that translates to somewhere we estimate between 800 and 900 per year. So it's a sizable amount, but it's also an amount that we can strategize around that. We saw great success in our community over the last couple of years with veterans homelessness.
Yes.
And the size of the population is not too different right now. So by taking a data-driven and a collaborative approach to ending youth homelessness, we can do it.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's a little bit delicate. When I was reading to prepare to talk to you about this, I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, that more than 50% of young women who are now homeless in Austin are either pregnant or caring for a child. Is that a true stat?
That sounds accurate. And what we often find at LifeWorks is that is a huge motivation to get off the street. Right?
Understandably.
One of the myths of youth on the street is that they choose to be there. Right, and what we find is that often the drivers to being on the street are aging out of foster care after 9, 15, 30 foster care placements,
Long time,
right?
yeah.
Or exiting the youth criminal justice system, right? And just not having the support network, or just deciding, hey, I want to try this on my own, and they hook up with a street network, and so it's often a lot of engagement work to form a different path. But and so it can happen that you get pregnant while on the street,
And we'll
or
keep
start a
talking
family.
about this. I want to bring a few more
yeah.
people out, and let's talk more about that and about veterans. I think
Sure.
that's really important, and about families and people that aren't children but that also
Right.
need services to improve their situation. 56% of Austin's homeless population report having been the victim of some kind of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or psychological. 44% report dealing with current mental health issues. And contrary to the myth that most homeless people are addicts or alcoholics, only 17% of Austin's homeless population report habitual drug or alcohol use. Okay, we're joined now by two more very important voices in this conversation. Ann Howard, Executive Director for ECHO, which stands for Ending Community Homelessness Coalition, as we mentioned before at the top of the show. And we also have Sharon Lowe, Executive Director of the Foundation for the Homeless. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. So Susan and I were talking about the way that a lot of the different organizations in Austin work together, that you don't really approach homelessness as your individual problem with your individual focus, that you all work together. Is that true? Is that something you...
It's true. I think we're looking to be very client focused. And so where can this overarching effort meet the needs of that one individual client? So we don't ask the client to go all over town looking for help. We work together to figure out what that client needs and who in this community can help meet that need.
Very nice. So you all really work together, and it's a joint effort. And to that end, I understand that the city, or actually just the local overall budget, has increased because you were able to get a grant. Is that true?
We competed nationally with a homeless youth demonstration grant, and we were awarded $5.2 million. That'll be used over 2 years. And right now, LifeWorks staff and ECHO staff are working super hard together to lead a community planning effort so that we can put every penny to really good use.
I love that. I love it. And part of the way that you all work together is, it seems to me, just in reading the research, is that you are attacking one audience or group at a time. So we talked about youth. Veterans, I think, has been addressed quite a bit. Has that been central for you?
Right.
Veterans?
We rolled out this community collaboration using a shared database and working off a list of clients. We call it the by name list, to really figure out who's the most vulnerable.
Do you mean literally names of people? I just want to make sure
Literally
it's
names
literally
of people.
that puts
Yeah.
a human face to the name.
So
I
there's
like
a concerted effort to do outreach into the community to find individuals experiencing homelessness and offer them shelter and get to their name and know where they are, and then be able to figure out how to match them with on a path to housing. What are the housing resources that'll work for that individual client? And we did this successfully with veterans, and so then we sort of mimicked that and tweaked it a bunch to work in a 100-day challenge to address youth homelessness, and are now building on that success and trying to figure out how do we do this for youth and then do this for families.
So you approached the veterans issue and solved it, or got real close, and now you're on to youth. And then we were talking about before the show, you're talking now more about looking at families, and not just veterans or youth, but families with children who are dealing with homelessness.
Yes.
So what is your organization doing? What's your role in the collective?
Well, the cornerstone and foundation for the homelessness work is collaboration with faith-based and community partners, including ECHO and LifeWorks and others. And
Great.
so the vehicle that we're using to accept referrals of literally homeless people is the coordinated assessment. So we've made strides in using a vulnerability index to work with families and individuals who are literally homeless, pin the resources to them in the community to find out what is the best fit for them, and then rehouse them as quickly as possible.
So I like that we're talking about people, and we're making it, it's not just numbers on a board, they're not just statistics, but you putting a name to it, that you're talking about actually working with the person. What is it like for these people to be homeless in Austin, specifically in Austin? What is it like to be homeless here?
If you're very young, it's hard to handle it. If you're old, it's hard to handle it. And they're also it's an uphill battle, because while we're working collectively very strong together, we're short on resources. And so they're waiting. The clients who have stepped up and asked for help are waiting for that help.
And while they're waiting, they're exceptionally vulnerable. There's a lot of concern, a lot of public safety concern around homeless populations, and particularly if you're a youth or female youth and LGBT youth, then your chances of being victimized while living on the street are significant. So in addition to just the discomfort and inconvenience and uncertainty of living on the street, there's just a safety vulnerability that is through the roof. I talk to individuals all the time who are just like, they're kind of marveled that I don't have to wake up every 2 hours and check my stuff.
Oh,
right.
And it's not something that most of us can really appreciate. We can empathize, but we don't really know what that's like,
right,
to wake up and realize it's raining, all my stuff is wet. And that's a very practical way to look at it. I'm wondering where we're going to be in 5 years. Where do you think we'll be in 5 years in Austin?
I think we will have perfected the system, and we will have grown the infrastructure. The amount of resources will be greater, because I think every day people are realizing that this is not the Austin we want to be. That for us to to prosper and be on the top of the right lists, we need to address homelessness at a scale that can really end homelessness and respond in a real quick manner.
And what we mean by ending homelessness, be it veterans, youth, families, is not that you'll never see or a family won't ever experience homelessness, but it is rare, meaning that we are coordinated enough to know who is homeless, who has space in their housing programs, that we have built a capacity of services and housing to where homelessness is rare. It's brief. We're able to get somebody off the street
Shortened
quickly.
it, I read that.
Yeah,
Taking it from 200 something days to 90 days. Is
Right.
that
Exactly.
Right.
And that it's non-recurring. We get people in the right housing suited to their needs with the right supportive services. So we set people up for success.
So when we say resources, is a bed a resource? Is that one resource, or do you mean programs when you say resources? I just want
All of the
to drill
above.
into it.
Yeah.
So a hot meal, is that a resource, or is that the product of a
Absolutely.
Of a resource?
Part of the evolution of our community too, though, is recognizing how important the rapid housing piece is. You know?
What does that mean, rapid housing?
Oh,
I don't know
it
what that
means, well, it's also a phrase we call housing first, which is getting people into housing immediately, regardless of their barriers,
Okay.
right? Do they have
because
a
that's
job?
the center issue.
Yeah, and so many of the safety issues can be addressed just once they're housed, and then we can come in and offer the workforce support or mental health support or what families or individuals need to be successful. But just the basic safety piece of just that housing is a tremendous upfront resource.
So I also read that a significant percentage of our homeless in Austin are employed, that they have jobs. And I know a lot of people think of homeless people as unemployed and not having a place to go every day. But 33%, is that right? 33% are employed people?
That's right. One of the first ways Sharon and I got to know each other was by offering safe places for women to sleep. We partnered with congregations and churches, and each night women would come in and sleep on the floor of a church so they could get off the street. And we had women that not only came in to sleep, but got up at the crack of dawn to shower and catch the bus to get to their job. And we've heard countless stories of families sleeping in their car. This one that I heard early on where the dad was shaving in the gas station bathroom before he went to work. I mean, people, there is a resilience, I think, of the people here in Austin that are trying to make things work for their own family. And so the more concerted we can be about workforce and healthcare and housing, the better chance folks have to stay strong.
And can you guys tell me, go ahead.
We have another larger population of invisibly homeless families, and most of them are working.
Tell me what you mean by invisible.
They are living in doubled up situations with family or friends or anywhere they can find as long as they can. They are not considered homeless by HUD standards. They are not literally homeless. But,
So they have a place to stay, but it's not their place to stay. Is that
right,
what you
and
mean?
they are likely to become literally homeless in the near future.
At risk, you guys have taught me well today.
Yes.
They're at
Yeah.
risk. So how do you address their needs? Because I would imagine that's a different set of needs, right? That's a different level of program.
The needs for them deal with affordable housing, doing something to arrest poverty by creating living wage jobs, and improving education.
Now, I understand that around 50% of our homeless here in Austin report having been abused. Is that the reason that you're providing mental health services, or is mental health services separate from that kind of?
I think a lot of our clients that we're trying to help have experienced, they've maybe come out of a poverty situation, so their own safety net is very shallow. And so any one thing that my family might be able to handle because we're in a different place, we're starting in a different place, makes it very difficult for people.
Right, and what I can say for youth, particularly the transition-aged youth, because so many of the youth who are experiencing homelessness are coming out of foster care.
Okay.
You know, if you age out of foster care, you stand about a 25% chance of experiencing homelessness. And a lot of that is due, like Ann said, to not having a stable, infrastructure of support.
And you're starting from a different place. is what
You're starting from a different place, but also very real mental health consequences of trauma that has not been treated consistently and not been resolved. So a lot of the mental health issues we see with transition-age youth are really rooted in childhood trauma.
Okay. So that does make sense then, that abuse in your past may lead to needing some help with mental health.
And ongoing abuse that they might experience on the street and victimization.
Okay.
And I think that really talks to folks who have experienced abuse at some point in their life and the trauma stays with them. There is a certain number who are actually fleeing abuse. We had a wonderful sort of collaboration example last week where our outreach teams were looking for a woman who needed housing badly. And while they were out off of Riverside, this woman approached and said, "Are you with ECHO?" And they said yes, and she identified herself. And they, connected with her to get her over to another provider, Trinity Center. And the next day, she ended up talking to a police officer who got her to Trinity Center where she needed to go. And by the end of the day, she was safe in a shelter. And so, probably 10 different people within 24 hours connected with this individual. And that's what it took to get her to come in off the street. And she was actively fleeing some domestic violence.
Well, that brings up another point. I hear that Austin has an outreach street team. Is that something that you guys participate in or are part of?
Yeah, so that team is called the Homeless Outreach Street Team, and it consists of a couple of Austin police officers and some caseworkers from Integral Care, which is our local mental health authority, and they're connected to ECHO, which means all of our organizations. And so they're helping not only us find clients who we'd like to get into housing because we know their vulnerability, but they're also addressing sort of crises that are happening on the street with clients experiencing homelessness. Okay. And so it's been a great sort of liaison between services and the folks on the street.
I like that. It sounds like Austin is taking that approach. It's collaborative, we're all in this together, and we're all going to focus resources and energies on solve this, now learn what we learned, solve this. Is that a fair representation?
I think that's fair, and I want to underscore that the collaboration is it's not just the nonprofit community. The thing that really advanced our success with veterans was leadership at the top. It was the Mayor Adler saying, "Let's do this," and he was following up on a pledge that Mayor Leffingwell had made before he left office. And by having that leadership at the top, he was able to bring in the business community and provide us with some resources and get the apartment association and the Austin Board of Realtors involved. And so we know that this is a public-private partnership moving forward that all of Austin needs to be engaged in.
And speaking of all of Austin, I want to point out that I read that 40% or somewhere in that neighborhood of homeless people in Austin are African American. Juxtapose that versus for our total population, only 8% of all Austin, not homeless people, but all citizens of Austin, 8% are African American. Are there special services or is there anything being done to make sure that that seeming inequity is addressed and that we're approaching that particular segment of the population?
Right.
Yes.
And I think it's important to note that really gross disproportionality reflects disproportionality that you see in criminal justice,
yes,
in foster care, in any number of things that drive
and we did an
homelessness,
entire show about
poverty.
the disproportionate.
poverty
Sure.
in general. So, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest pieces of the collaboration is just baseline establishing the cultural competence to, and
Finding the right words to say and knowing who to talk to say them.
well, and I think the most important thing is what you brought up at the very beginning. We're dealing with people, one person at a time.
People
right? And
who
not,
have a name. I think that's really important.
and not get lost in the statistics.
You're
but,
not a statistic, you're a name. I think
Right.
that's the most important thing that came out of this conversation, is that you told me that all of you are working with people who have names, and they're on a list, and you know who they are, and you're keeping track of them and making sure that they are getting what they need. And that's a human way to look at it, and I like that.
I'd like to point out that as we're working together and looking at sort of moving forward and how do we do more of what's working, we've called on sort of a 5-point plan, and we've talked about a lot of it today, of outreach, shelter, housing, collaboration, and the fifth is addressing disparities.
Good.
Because we can't know those numbers and not do something about it.
That's a perfect place to end. I want to thank all of you for coming today. It's a really good conversation, and we'll try to keep it going online and tell people how to find your organizations as well.
Great, wonderful.
Thank you.
Having a place to call home is something many of us take for granted. But for some residents of Central Texas, life without a home is a harsh and daily reality. The kinds of solutions we've talked about today are not just handouts, but helpful programs, education, and assistance to help people that are experiencing homelessness and seek a path to self-sufficiency. This is not a problem based solely on poverty, addiction, or mental health issues. It is becoming more common to see families, children, people who have simply lost their job or suffering some form of abuse falling between the cracks and into homelessness. If you want to help to be part of the solution, come find us on Facebook at facebook.com/civilsocietytv and keep the conversation going, or go to our website, nonprofitaustin.org/civilsociety, to get more information about the organizations and programs my guests have shared here today. I want to thank Susan Mcdowell, Sharon Lowe, and Ann Howard for helping us really look at these problems as for the programs and their organizations provide. That's all the time we have today. I'm Julie Niehoff. Thank you for watching Civil Society.